This video is brought to you by Magic Spoon, but more on that in a moment. Usually when opening one of these videos with a little bit of history, I ask you to cast your mind back to a date or a time, the place that a card was first printed, or when it was first played, or the set that it came from. The problem with Ikoria though is that, well, it launched during the height of the global pandemic. This not only means that the actual release date for it differs depending on region, with apparently Asia getting it earlier, that is if the MTG wiki is to be believed, but also that period in many of our lives was a massive blur. A messy sludge of events where time has no meaning and everything just blurs together. Except for me, Ikoria is actually a standout moment in all of that. Not because I enjoyed the set, no, quite the opposite. The set was a novelty, with the lead up to release and previous season dominated with memes about how Mutate didn't make any sense, because it kind of didn't at first, and the dumb stuff you could do with it. But beyond that, the set was largely forgettable, with the exception of one other mechanic, and the 10 creatures that came with it. 2 whole years have passed since we were first introduced to Companion, one of Magic's most powerful mechanics ever printed, and in my opinion, the biggest fucking design mistake in modern Magic. This is the story of Companion, with 2 years of retrospection. And spoilers, I think the mechanic fucking sucks. But first, allow me to make some money to allow me to keep making these videos. This video is brought to you by Magic Spoon. That's right, the milk father himself, the most milkable man in esports entertainment, got himself a breakfast cereal sponsorship, and it has magic in the name. Could it be any better? Magic Spoon brings you a guilt-free treat that tastes like childhood nostalgia. I'm a big fan of cereal myself, and I'm also looking to improve the food I eat and the way I treat my body. This means that 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 grams of carbs in each serving helps me to hit those macro goals really well. I'm in love with a peanut butter flavor, and sometimes I even mix peanut butter and chocolate like some kind of decadent cereal pervert. Hit the link in the description below and grab a variety pack for yourself. Use the code Kenobi at checkout for $5 off any order, or go to magicspoon.com/Kenobi. They're so confident you'll love it, they will give you 100% happiness guarantee. If you don't like it, they will refund you, no questions asked. Big thank you to Magic Spoon and the delicious cereal for sponsoring this video. Hit the link in the description below and make sure you use the code Kenobi to save yourself some money. Companion, a mechanic that was so unbelievably fucked up, it got a card instantly banned in Commander, a card banned in Vintage on power level grounds, and went on to warp every format it touched. It really did do way more damage to everything than any other mechanic you can name. It is actually difficult to stress just how powerful this was in a succinct manner, hence why I'm making a video looking back at it and talking about its many trials and tribulations. Originally, Companion was so cracked. Beyond any reasonable doubt, honestly. In its original guise, you had access to a Companion for as long as you met its requirement, at which point you could have it in your sideboard slots and cast it from there directly into play. If you were thinking this is just Commander in 60 card constructed with extra steps, then you're almost right. You're just missing the part where Yorion requires you to play 80 card constructed. This mechanic was evidently playing with a thematic space akin to Commanders, as we've mentioned, extra and special decks from other card games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, and a series of cards in Hearthstone that did unique things and powerful things if you met a certain deck requirement on ETB. The one I played with back in the day was Reno Jackson, one of the earlier ones of this. Oh, look at those forearms. Companion gave you access to more resources than your non-companion playing friends and opponents. Supposedly, if you met the downside that they pushed upon you in deck construction, you got the bonus of having access to a reasonably powerful creature. The problem was, as we'll discuss as we move forward, the downside of playing these things was largely minimal or absent, especially in the case of 2 to 3 of them. The reason this extra resource or this mechanic in itself was such a problem was that it warped Magic on a fundamental level, breaking some of its core tenets, some of its core gameplay mechanics. Instead of 7 cards in your opening hand, you now have 8. One of those cards is certain to be a particular creature. By design, something powerful you can build around. Zerda, for example, was a combo piece in the command zone, and pre-nerf Garuda too. This in essence gives you a free tutor for your game plan. There is never, for better or worse, a chance that you don't draw your companion. It will always affect the game, no matter what. It's always coming, it's inevitable. And this leads to the homogenization of game plans and play patterns. This is perhaps also an argument for the Companion as a positive force, because it increased deck consistency and made a lot of matches play the same. It reduced RNG. You always have to play around Lurrus or Yorion because your opponent always has access to it. Always. Short of being game warping and breaking the fundamental mechanics of Magic, we have to stop and admit that the early weeks of playing with Companion were fun. The mechanic is fun initially when you're building around it and building into it. And it does feel, and it is evocative of, having access to an animal companion or an associated Pokemon or whatever you want to describe it as. As I said, there is a bit of a Pokemon adjacent theming going on here. All of the companions are fantastical creatures that you have access to as a companion monster if you do the right thing, and I and many others colloquially call them Pokemon because they feel like Pokemon. It's hard to look at Lutri the Spell Chaser, an electrical elemental otter, and not see it as a slightly more realistic or lifelike Pokemon. Beyond that, it also evokes ideas of Commander because you have a legendary creature in a zone outside of the game that you can draw upon. There was a lot of theorizing that this was Wizards trying to turn every format into Commander, and well, they succeeded for a time. And on the topic of Lutri and Commander, well, this is where the problems began. It was literally banned when revealed in Commander. The reason for it being axed immediately was that it was a free extra spell and effect for any deck that could play it. Basically any deck that had blue and red in its Commander identity. His companion requirement was automatically fulfilled in any Commander deck outside of the Relentless Rat style decks, and thus means you always start with a Lutri in the companion zone. This proved controversial for numerous reasons. Firstly, a lot of people couldn't get their head around why this was a problem. The idea that the only one color combination in the game would automatically get a copy of a flash 3/2 for 3 mana in their opening hand, but didn't seem unfair to some. Those people are a bit of a lost cause. Either they misunderstand Magic on a fundamental level, they aren't quite there yet, and this is not me looking down upon them, but they might have to open up a wider discussion about card advantage and similar, or they were often arguing disingenuously. Some of the people that took issue with this banning, among others, some of these people would be upset if the rules committee gave a shit ton of money to charity, or they gave every child in your local area a load of sweets for free, no strings attached. They're just upset at anything the RC does. There just really is no pleasing some Commander nerds. Next up was that it was a cute creature with Otter in the creature type. This led to people immediately feeling an affinity for the card, but then being told, no, sorry, it's not playable in your casual format. This issue serves to exaggerate the ongoing tension of not having the old banned as Commander versus banned in the 99. Once upon a time, there was 2 ban lists, one for your Commander and one for cards in the 99, and it gave granularity to the ban list and it allowed things to be banned on one and not the other. I preferred that. But it was taken away in the essence, or the spirit of making it simpler for deck construction. Personally, I don't think people will get confused by the 2 lists. I mean, people probably get more confused by Kitchen Finks not being playable in my Lesher deck, if I'm honest. That's right, I brought up Hybrid Mana. Yeah! And lastly, where did the companion live in Commander? Well, in normal sets, it takes up one of your sideboard slots. It actually has a downside, a minimal downside, of taking up one of your 15 slots. There are no sideboards in Commander. Wishes just do not work. So, where does it live? Well, it lives in a special companion zone that was made to allow these cards to function. And this rung a little bit weird for some people, myself included. It felt like we were making exceptions for new stuff that Wizards were doing in the main office to allow them to be played in Commander, where we don't do that for things like Wishes and other stuff that aren't being pressed right now, aren't being pushed. Personally, I don't have a horse in this race. I don't give a shit whether Wishes are playable in Commander or not playable. If anything, I guess they'd break the competitive top tier powerful side of things wide open if they were. But it is just weird that we were just like, fuck it, companion works, when we don't allow other sideboard concerned cards to work in that way. It smells a little bit of a concession to the big mother company wants to sell some cards, so you better make them playable. I generally would have liked the hard stance that no, sideboards just don't exist in Commander, but fuck it. They do now, kind of. In many ways, the early banning of Lutri was an omen, or perhaps a dramatic foreshadowing. If the companion can be played with little or perhaps no downside, maybe it's just too fucking good. Right? Look, I don't want to do that weird thing where we say, how did they not see this coming during testing? Firstly, because if you don't know, they don't test for Modern or Legacy or anything beyond Standard anyway, which explains the power level of Modern Horizons, am I right? But let's be honest, there is a bit of how did they not see this coming when it comes to the main offender. Let's just jump straight to Lurrus for a moment. Being revealed during spoiler season, people immediately saw it. Reddit, Twitter, and your mother. They could all tell that Lurrus was going to allow you to do things like play a Lion's Eye Diamond you just cracked, or Lotus Petals, or Black Lotuses in Vintage. And beyond just replaying some of the most broken fast mana in all of Magic, you could replay any 2-mana thing. Dark Confidants, Tarmogoyfs, Thalia, like, you name it, you could replay it. And that was pretty good. Even I, having played the mechanic for all of about 2 days, had this to say. 4-1 with this bad boy in Legacy today on stream. Companions are super fun and interesting to build with, but they still feel perhaps a little too good. That fun perhaps was emanating from the fact that I was smashing other people that hadn't adopted the companion yet. This was a day or two after release, so Lewis wasn't readily available for everyone. You had to clamber to get them. The fun did not last for long. It became tiresome fast, and Lewis was actually banned in Legacy 1 month later in May, alongside Zerda, which was providing, like I said earlier, a combo deck where half the combo was in your fucking command zone. I had this to say on the matter. I wonder if Lewis has an anus. I'll be honest, I don't know what prompted me to ponder this aloud to around 25,000 people on the internet, but all I know is that if you are not following me on Twitter, you're missing out on this premium pondering cat's anus content. At the same time, Lewis bit the bullet in Vintage because it finally broke Black Lotus. It was only a matter of time, but outside of Lotus starts, Vintage just didn't want to play permanents over 2 of CMC anyway, outside of Monastery Mentor, so the format evolved into Lewis assisted blue piles dropping their mentors versus Dredge and Shops decks. So really, it looked a lot like it does most of the time anyway. But it being banned in Vintage was a unique thing. It was very, very rare, almost unheard of to have a card banned on a power level concern in Vintage, because that's where all the broken shit lives and does the broken shit. It's where the power 9 is playable. It's where you can Black Lotus into things. For this card to get banned in Vintage really meant something was going wrong here. Besides that, being banned in Vintage brought another weird complication that I only found about today. The RC wanted Lewis to remain legal in Commander, and up to this point, anything banned in Vintage was banned in Commander. And thusly, they had to reword the Commander ban list to be its own separate thing, its own separate entity, as opposed to an expanded version of the Vintage list. That's right, Lewis truly does fuck up everything that pussy touches. As time went on and every format saw companions as freebie includes that warped everything from Gyruda combo glass cannons in Historic to Tron having access to Gigantha in fucking Modern. Not long after that, Companion got errated. Companion has the honor of being the only mechanic in all of Magic that had a power level errata that changes how the card reads in the flesh. Reading a Companion now does not explain a Companion now. To date, Lewis is the only one I believe that has had a reprint in an event deck shortly before him being banned in that format, showing both the new and old versions of the card. The fix was to change it from a castable from sideboard to having a special action where you can pay 3 mana to put it into your hand. This was a significant nerf. Firstly, it went from uninteractive immediate gain upon casting to an increase in 3 mana cost, and whilst it could be spread across multiple turns to allow you to play them on curve, that also gave you a point of interaction. Hand Disruption could catch a Companion if you put it into your hand prior to being able to cast it that turn. Beyond that, 3 mana was a big slowdown for formats like Modern, Legacy and Vintage. However, it did allow fringe stuff like ticking up Aether Vial up to 5 in Legacy D&T to put a Yorion into hand and then put it into play. Yeah, D&T was laughing all the way to the bank in many ways. And I give the Aether Vial example because D&T is just one of many decks that ended up finding its home in the 80 card Yorion variant, where objectively, if we take the results of events into account, the 80 card version is just superior, much to my distress. In Modern, Lewis continued to dominate, with anything from Jund to Hammer to Burn playing this fucking thing, because outside of not playing Liliana in the Jund deck, it was basically free. Gigantha continued to be a free beater in the side of Tron, and some control variants played Kahira, giving them a random body they could play because they were creatureless. Even the advent of Forces to Plowshares in Modern Horizons 2 couldn't deter people from putting Kahira in their sideboards for control, because whoopsie, it's an elemental lol. Meanwhile, 4-color elementals and blink shells in Modern adopted Yorion as their companion of choice. In Legacy, the only companion that persevered was Yorion for the most part, becoming a mainstay in Death and Taxes, Stoneblade, and some variants of blue-white control. On the upside, much like the previous weekend just gone of me recording this video, blue-white X control decks, in this case Jeskai, American colors, blue-white-red decks, they can win without Yorion in their sideboard, so that's nice, I guess. In February 2021, the nerf allowed Lures to be unbanned in Vintage, as it was deemed just too slow to be format defining, but just good enough to see a little bit of play here and there. After that, Lewis rose to the top of Modern, being the most played creature, not accounting for playsets, like I said, Burn, Death Shadow, Hardened Scales, Hammer Time, Blue-Black Control, Boggles, and other fringe decks. Eventually, they saw sense and banned the fucking cat in both Modern and Pioneer, which is a format that I don't follow closely enough to really talk about in depth in this video. That all happened in the March of 2022. I mean, 3 months before the 2-year birthday of Lewis. Good riddance to bad rubbish. The ongoing issue is that multiple companions are still ever present in spite of nerfs and bans, and there's perhaps an argument that we have hit the right level of representation for the mechanic now. It isn't absolutely dominating formats. It's just there, much like other mechanics are in Modern and Legacy. Every mechanic has its day, right? Storm might be out of popularity in Modern right now, but it only takes a couple of new cards to push it back to probably showing up more than what Companion does. Although at the moment, Companion is seen far more than Storm. And this is the thing, no other mechanic other than Companion makes me feel like I wish it didn't happen. I would be happy if Companion just went away tomorrow or never happened. And there is no other mechanic, I have to stress that, there's no other mechanic in Magic that feels that way beyond perhaps Anti or Dexterity, things that are long gone because they're like archaic leftovers from the early days of Magic, things that I probably should do videos on to explain. Yorion itself is a big culprit in pushing the cost of both Legacy and Modern decks up, as you now have to procure another 20, or I guess 19 technically, because it's in the sideboard, another 19 to 20 staples to play the optimum build lest you lag behind the competition. Travis Norman on Twitter made a fantastic point in recent threads about how the Blink decks aren't blinking Coiling Oracle anymore, but instead of flickering $30 to $60 staples like Solitude. Yorion actively pushes up the average deck price of the format, which is a big downside in my opinion. Once upon a time, D&T was one of the budget decks. Now it's an 80 card deck, it's getting quite expensive, alongside the fact that Solitude hasn't been reprinted because Wizards, they're just fucking shit with the reprint policy. But again, credit where credit is due, Yorion did open up space in D&T decks to allow old favourites and fringe tech and experimentation, simply by virtue of more deck slots. But ultimately those slots were taken up by expensive chase rares from newer sets. I also wonder if Yorion would have been a problem in Modern and Legacy if Paper Magic was ongoing throughout where the pandemic was. Like, we didn't really have a Pro Tour for Modern, for example. We haven't had GPs for these formats because of the global pandemic and the shutting down of events. I do wonder if 80 card decks would have increased shuffling time, and there's a lot of shuffling in Modern Legacy already, and made deck checks just a bit slower as well, which would hold up entire rounds at smaller events especially. So I wonder, in a similar way that top is a time concern more so than a power level concern, to sensitive running top, whether Yorion would be banned or considered a banning on the same sort of level. And the same that Battle of Wits is not really expected to be played at a high level of competition, nor is Four Horsemen, which is kind of shadow banned for the way that it comes up with a non-deterministic, slow grinding loop. Again, I probably should do a whole video on those things. Yorion carries the mantle now of one of the worst mechanics ever printed, and Lewis catching 4 bans in his lifetime, he just has to look on down from the ban list in the sky. Companion is the biggest mistake in Magic mechanics, in my humble opinion. Even Storm and Dredge, the boogeymen of older formats, the cards that are often compared to when talking about new mechanics and whether they're broken, those things don't really compare to Companion anymore. I guess it was only a matter of time before they made a mistake that was as powerful or as broken as former mistake. On a long enough timeline, this was bound to happen. And I'm glad we see mistakes, as it shows a willingness to explore new ground, and that keeps the game interesting and exciting. Hell, as much as I fucking hate Loris, with 2 years of hindsight, it led to some fun videos, some fun streams, some fun gameplay. Even if it became frustrating after a time, we needed to ban it. I talked about it in this video here, where I think that old broken stuff has a nostalgia for me. It's cool to own your problem, and it's cool to deal with it, and perhaps the bannings are enough at this point. I wouldn't be sad if I found out tomorrow they were just removing Companion from all of the cards, like the little text bit, and then reintroducing them, taking them out of the ban lists. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you found this informative and interesting. Let me know if you think I'm being too harsh in the comment section, or you think they've done enough now. Thanks for watching, smash that like button, let me know in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe. Ta-ta for now.